Last video we talked about the nature of internet porn, how it grabs your brains and destroys it. EasyPeasy is the only book you need to leave this addiction, I'm telling you. Look, our brain is not really designed for an online harem, allowing us to flick between more potential mates in 15 minutes than our ancestors had in several lifetimes. Now I wonder, what if our ancestors had access to internet porn? Never mind. We wouldn't be here at the first place, thank God. The constant exposure to a super stimulus rewires your brain. Just like nofap rewires your brain away from porn, similarly, watching too much porn rewires your brain to keep falling down in the darkest pit. The only difference is nofap is hard and yesfap is really easy. Really easy. And many porn users know this fact, but still decides to keep doing the deed. Most users swears that they only watch static and soft porn and therefore they are fine, when in actuality they are straining at the leash, fighting with their willpower to resist temptations. If done too often and for too long, they depletes their willpower considerably and they begin failing in other life projects where willpower is of great value, like exercise, dieting, etc. And failing in these areas make them feel miserable and guilty, cascading into using pornography again. If this isn't done, they'll vent their anger and depression onto their loved ones. You see how these users are creating their own cycle of defaulting. One of the basic brainwashing regarding any addiction is that others are doing it. That means I'm missing out something, then I must do it as well. See, these types of brainwashing is extremely powerful and you need to be aware of its effects. Technology continues to grow and the future will bring exponentially faster sites and access methods. The porn industry is investing billions in virtual reality so that it will become the next best thing. We don't know where we're going, unequipped to deal with the present technology or what is to come. So we must prepare ourselves from right now as we speak. Usually the people who are addicts, they unconsciously sacrifices their energy, wealth, peace of mind, confidence, courage, self-respect, happiness, freedom, and the list goes on. And what do they gain from these considerable sacrifices? Absolutely nothing. Apart from the illusion of trying to get back to the state of peace, tranquility, and confidence that the non-users always enjoys. As we become increasingly hooked on the drug, the greater the need to relieve the withdrawal pangs becomes and the further the subtle traps drags you down. This process happens so slowly that you aren't even aware of it. Most young users don't realize they're addicted until attempting to stop, and even then, many won't admit it. The following is a conversation between a therapist and 100 teenagers. So usually the therapist will go, "You realize that internet porn is a drug and the only reason you're using it is that you cannot stop." The patient will say, "Nonsense, I enjoy it. If I didn't, I would stop." The therapist will say, "Just stop for a week to prove me wrong." "No need, I enjoy it. If I wanted to stop, I would." "Just stop for a week to prove yourself you aren't hooked." "What's the point? I enjoy it." You see how brainwashed they are? Now try to imagine getting to the stage where you're unable to be aroused, even with a very sexy and attractive partner. For a moment, pause and try to visualize life where a very lovely, charming lady has to compete and fail with the virtual porn stars occupying your harem mind to get your attention. Imagine the frame of mind of a person who, when issued with the warning, continues using and dies without ever having real sex with this charming and willing partner. It's easy to dismiss these people as weirdos or incels, but stories like this aren't fakes. This is what the awful novelty of the porn drug does to your brain. The more you go through life, the more courage is sapped, and the more you're deluded into believing porn is doing the opposite. Internet porn isn't relieving your nerves, it's slowly destroying them. One of the greatest gains of breaking the addiction is the return of your natural confidence and self-assurance. Basically, you become normal like you were in your childhood. Yeah, remember those days? Happy and running around? Many of my viewers have said that they can't study while on nofap, and I always tell them it's nothing but an excuse. Masturbating to porn doesn't help in concentration, my friend. Loss of concentration that users suffer when trying to escape isn't due to the absence of porn. You have mental blocks when you're addicted to something, and when you have a mental block, what do? You fire up the browser, which doesn't cure the block. So then what do? You do what you have to do, getting on with it just as non-users do. Most users think that porn helps them to relax. It doesn't. The frantic search to get the fix in those dark alleys of the internet porn, you scroll down for hours and hours straining your eyes. Does that sound relaxing to you? As night rolls in after a trip to a new place or a long day, we sit down to relax, relieving our hunger, thirst, and are completely satisfied. Well, the users are not, as they have another hunger to satisfy. Users think of porn as the icing on the cake, but in actuality, it's the little monster that needs feeding. The truth is that the addict can never be completely relaxed, and going through life, it gets exponentially worse. And many are choosing porn instead of dating. People are losing interest in their potential partners for taking them out for dinners, as internet porn is far easier. It involves no restaurant spending and had no possibility of a no from his date at the end of an evening. Why be bothered when their little monster keeps them craving the low-risk, high-reward scheme at their fingertips upon reaching home? One of the porn trap's subtleties is that the effects it has upon us, both physically and mentally, happen so gradually that we remain unaware of them and instead regard withdrawal as normal. The effect is similar to that of bad eating habits. We look at people who are grossly overweight and wonder how they could have possibly allowed themselves to reach that state. But suppose that it happened overnight. You went to bed trimmed, rippling with muscles, and not an ounce of fat on your body, and awoke to find yourself fat, bloated, and pot-bellied. So instead of waking up feeling fully rested and full of energy, you feel miserable, lethargic, and barely able to open your eyes. You would be panic-stricken, right? Wondering what awful disease you had contracted overnight, and yet the disease is exactly the same. The fact it took you 20 years to arrive there is irrelevant. Porn is the same. So make this clear in your mind. Porn doesn't fill a void, it creates one. You know what? I'm gonna say it. Addicts don't do this for enjoyment. Instead, they do it because they're miserable without it. It's apparent at this point, especially with younger users, that they've never considered it a lifetime addiction. Confirmed users should keep that in mind, that the situation will only get worse, with more studies coming out and more people talking about the ill effects of the internet porn. So wise up, remember you don't have to do it. It's a chain reaction. If you engage in the next porn session, it will lead you to the next one and the next one and the next one. So before ending this video, I want to list out some advantages of being a porn user. Yeah, exactly. There's none. See you in the next one and be brave.